On today's episode of Over the Loudspeaker, we're going to talk to two organizers from the Hayward Community Coalition, HayCoCOa, about their work as organizers here in the city of Hayward. They're going to talk a little bit about their wins, a little bit about how is it that they got involved, and what you can do to get involved in local organizing, in the movement, making change in your community. But we're going to start off with news from Collin over at the Hayward Herald. So we're going to jump into the headlines, and then we're going to hear from Vanessa and Lala from HayCoCOa, and that'll wrap up episode 2. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for subscribing, hitting that like button. We're trying to get to 100 subscribers. We're almost there. Follow Hayward Herald on Instagram and Substack. Let's get into it. Well, I was going to say happy 2025. It's a new year.
And it is
we've already completed 1 year of this show. Can you believe it?
1 year pilot.
1 year, yeah, exactly. 1 year pilot. So we're launching in, I think, right into the headlines, if you want to take them away.
Sure, I will take it away. So this is going to be stuff covering from last December. And as always, for any of these, if you have any idea or you want to learn more about any of these topics, feel free to check out our Substack, haywardherald.substack.com. The first headline is sewer rate increases are going to be coming in. Residents have recently gotten a notice about upcoming sewer rate increases. This is primarily due to the construction of the new water resources reclamation facility, which has been under construction for some time. The new water treatment facility is part of a state mandate to reduce the amount of nitrogen in the bay, which will reduce harmful algal blooms that kill just about everything in the bay. And if you've gotten the notice, don't freak out immediately at the cost of residential customers. Check out how much water you actually use, because the less you use, the less you pay. And it's going to be increasing over the course of, I think, 5 years or so. So it's not going to be all at once. Don't freak out. But this is something that everyone is going to be doing throughout the bay. We're just sort of ahead of the curve. Up next, we have homelessness. The City Council recently looked at their Let's House Hayward strategic plan, which is mostly an unfunded list of policies that the city wants to implement to tackle homelessness. A local housing group, House Hayward Now, along with multiple service provider partners, advocated for the city to focus on the over 300 unhoused students in the Hayward Unified School District. They advocated for two things specifically: a housing navigator to focus on building relationships and also case management for unhoused students, and also security deposit assistance, which can be a really big barrier for low-income students and families to get housing. Especially the big issue is with newcomers who have just come in from just fled, who have just relocated to the United States. Lastly, police spending and surveillance. At the most recent Council Public Safety Committee, HPD gave a preview of their upcoming purchase requests. While HPD already has 13 drones, they're likely to purchase additional ones in the coming year. Flock cameras are also on the increase in Hayward. And for those who don't know, flock cameras are AI-powered cameras that scan specifically the license plates of every car that passes by them. And that's every single car, not just ones that are in trouble. And they will then flag those cars so that HPD can follow up on them. Hayward currently has 50 cameras, but they're looking to purchase an additional 44 more by the end of 2025. HPD is also in talks with some HOAs to install privately owned flock cameras that HPD would then have access to in their broader network. HPD is also looking at implementing some unspecified AI technology for things like report writing and transcribing body cam footage, as well as translation technology for communication staff. And although there is a storied history of AI being really problematic in the criminal legal space, all of this was supported by council members Bonilla and Roche, as well as Mayor Mark Salinas.
And those are the headlines. Wow, Collin. I did want to spend just a second or two. Wait, are those all the headlines, Collin?
Those are all the headlines.
Okay, good. I did want to spend a minute sort of talking a little bit about the last piece on surveillance and this sort of move by the city to, or like this interest that I think not only Hayward, but a lot of cities across the Bay Area and really nationally are interested in emerging technology, right? And it's this, I think you put it in your article very nicely, I don't remember who said it, as an arms race, that, the bad guys are going to have all of this technology. They're going to be using all of this. We should have it too. And I think it's an interesting trend that's happening not just locally, but also nationally and internationally, right? So like Ronan Farrow has this new documentary out on HBO Max, I think, called Surveillance, about the Pegasus program, which is around this technology that is developed by an Israeli corporation or company that basically created spyware to hack into your phone using whether it's Apple or Android, and basically can copy all of the data that you have on your phone. We're not talking about that here at that level of surveillance here locally in Hayward, but there, I think it is interesting because there, I think it was the ACLU that did this report a couple of years ago on Flock, which it was the first time I had heard about Flock. And I'll just share this tidbit. It says, new and rapidly growing surveillance company called Flock Safety is building a form of mass surveillance unlike any seen before in American life. The company has focused on selling automatic license plate recognition, which is what you mentioned, to home associations and other private parties, as well as police departments. But it has done through a business model that effectively enlists its customers into a giant centralized government surveillance network, and the company is aiming to expand its offerings beyond ALPR, license plate recognition, to traditional video surveillance, while also expanding its AI machine vision capabilities. So I think one question that I just wanted to ask you is what has there been any talk at all from the city council side around oversight, around sort of what checks and balances will exist for the use of technology?
Not really. I mean, the Council Public Safety Committee is a really, really recent development. Like, we didn't have anything resembling police oversight whatsoever. And this is, by the way, very mild police oversight because it's council doing it, not an independent party. And we've only had that for less than a year. The Community Services Commission tried to push for the Community Advisory Panel for the Chief of Police to be more open. Council pitched a bit of a fit about it. They decided to close it down and open this instead. And while this does daylight a lot more and we get more frequent updates from the police around what they're doing, there hasn't been a lot of talk about it. And so the short answer is not really. I will say that the council members who are part of that I mentioned seemed pretty hot for the technology. I believe Councilmember Roche might have brought up one or two privacy concerns, but they were pretty mealy-mouthed. It was a lot of, we're going to talk about it, but we're not going to actually worry about the thing. We're just going to trust that when Chief Matthews says, yes, this is going to be, it's totally secure, we're going to say, oh yeah, okay, sure, that's fine. We're just going to take that at face value. So I don't think, there hasn't been an interest that I've seen in council of having some really in-depth interrogation of these technologies. Mark Salinas was all in. That's all I can say on the AI stuff. He said he saw a demonstration at the mayor's conference or something of some of these like transcribing technologies, which sounds really problematic to me. And he was like, these are so great. I love them. But without, again, mentioning any specific technologies, it's impossible to know what they were actually talking about.
Right. Yeah, I think, the last thing I'll say about this sort of, what is it? This critique, not a critique, is this report that was written by the ACLU about Flock safety is the first one is the centralization of data, but then there's the problems, just as you mentioned, around accuracy, right? It's like whether or not they're actually reading the license plates as they should be. Can you imagine having your license plate read and it reads it wrong? And that could put you in serious trouble. I know, as someone who's had their car stolen and has recovered it on his own, they told me that that's a big no-no because you'll get pulled over, guns drawn, right? So you can only imagine what a huge mistake, the sort of impact that could have on someone's life if there's problems around accuracy. And then, of course, the sort of expansion of mass surveillance technology, just because a local police department says that they're going to not abuse the technology doesn't mean that a larger law enforcement agency won't, or that they're not sharing data with the federal government, especially with the sort of new administration that we're going to this year. We're going to sort of be doing Trump 2.0. So we just don't know where this data is going to be and who's going to have access to this data and what they're going to do with it.
Yeah, and I think to me, it was, especially with Flock, it was really striking that this was something that HPD was looking to deploy with local HOAs, because as was reported on in Last Week Tonight, some time ago, HOAs have a lot of power around their particular little jurisdiction, their little fiefdom, and also that they would, not only would those HOAs have access to those cameras, HPD would have direct access to those cameras as well. Those HOAs wouldn't have access to HPD's other network of cameras, but it struck me as being very similar to the problems around Ring cameras, how they get contracted out to police departments all the time, but on a greater scale, because instead of having to ask for permission or ask for a warrant, they would just have direct access to those cameras all the time. And especially as in that report, which I hadn't read, thank you for bringing that up, if Flock is looking to maybe take those cameras and use them, move them beyond license plate readers, and potentially even maybe use the same cameras for generalized surveillance, that would instantly have a network of hundreds of cameras potentially around the city. Oakland apparently has something like 200 of them right now, that would instantly go from being just focused on license plates to just generalized surveillance, which would be, in my opinion, particularly catastrophic and dangerous.
And it seems like that's the world we're sort of moving into, whether we like it or not, right? So it's especially important to, one, get, for folks who are listening to this for the first time and are like, what is this? What are you talking about? I suggest you do some quick Google searches, watch maybe the Ronan Farrow documentary, which is okay. It's good. It's not particularly exciting or anything along those lines, but it's good. Look into the story of Edward Snowden, who whistle blew on the big spying program under the Obama administration, the PRISM program. PRISM, not prison, but PRISM program. And yeah, do your due diligence, learn more about this, because this seems to be the world that we're sort of entering in 2025 and onward. So we'll stop there. Let me pause here. Unless you had something else to add, Collin.
I was just going to add, once again, if you want to look more into these headlines, check us out at haywardherald.substack.com. These are some of the news stories I've covered over the last month of December. Check us out.
There's the ticker.
And also, yeah, there's the ticker. And like, follow, and subscribe on our YouTube channel. Make sure to hit that bell below.
All right. Up next, we're going to interview two founding members of the Hayward Community Coalition, or HayCoCOa. The HayCoCOa started back in 2020 as a result of the uprisings that were happening nationally and locally in Hayward, in response to the death of George Floyd. Not only George Floyd, but others that were facing police brutality and that were being murdered by the police. And during that time, a group of, I want to say mostly young organizers, some of us not so young, came together to do something about it. And we actually have two organizers that are going to be joining us in just a second. But before that, I want to ask everyone to go visit HayCoCOa's website. You can find their mission statement, which I'm going to read to you in just a second. But you can also find all of the cool things that they've done over the past couple of years since they formed. HayCoCOa organizes to ensure land and resources that Hayward occupies and controls serves the community equitably. We prioritize collective democratic struggle through community organizing and stewardship in order to dismantle the systems of oppression and develop community-owned alternatives. That's the mission statement. You can find that on the website. Welcome, Vanessa and Lala, to Over the Loudspeaker. What a great second episode. I'm so honored to have you both join us and to be here to talk a little bit about what you all do, how you got involved with HayCoCOa.
Yeah. Hey, y'all. Hey, you too.
Yeah, we'll have maybe another ticker at some point saying, disclosing that we're Collin and I are also both members of HayCoCOa. I think we probably have to do that since, at this point, they might have already figured it out.
You can connect the dots.
Yeah, they can connect the dots. Exactly. So I wanted to talk a little bit of first about how is it that you all got involved in community organizing? Was organizing through HayCoCOa your first experience organizing, or was it something completely new to you, or had you done it before? Maybe we can start. Who would like to start off to talk about just a little bit of their background, getting involved and doing community organizing in Hayward?
Yeah, so in Hayward specifically, and I guess overall, I started organizing back in 2014. Unfortunately, because of two other murders, specifically Eric Garner and Michael Brown, there was a huge uprising with the BLM movement, and in solidarity, that's kind of how I was introduced to the organizing world. Fast forward, actually, HayCoCOa came after this enormous protest that was also student organized, students from East Bay, and I was part of that. So it was, always bittersweet to kind of like see how other movements come to be, and also like, unfortunately, continuing the same struggle that had like put me in the movement over 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Vanessa?
So I came into HayCoCOa as a newbie organizer. I would see things. I mean, as a Black woman, as a Latina woman, obviously, like, I was forced to feel and see a lot of things that were happening to my Black and brown brothers and sisters. But it wasn't until HayCoCOa formed that I was actually embedded into the movement in terms of like talking to folks that grew up in the same neighborhood, leading protests, going to city council meetings. Like, I was so far removed from all of that, even though I've been a lifelong Hayward resident. And so it was cool to be introduced to this new movement in my eyes, because obviously, like Lala said, this has been an ongoing thing. And so I joined HayCoCOa a few months after it was formed, and have been organizing with them ever since 2020. So it's cool to be entering year 5 with HayCoCOa with a lot of the same OG members.
Yeah, and year 5, it's crazy to think about how quickly time has moved since a lot of the uprisings that took place in 2020. It seems like just yesterday, but believe it or not, it's been 5 years. But HayCoCOa has managed to get a lot of things done, most notably, divesting from corporations that are invested in genocide. So there's this huge divestment movement to divest from the Israeli apartheid, which I think moved $1.6 million out of corporations that were supporting the apartheid regime. And key public safety reforms that took place over the past 5 years, most notably 350,000 plus for community projects across the city of Hayward, also known as the Hayward People's Budget. Those, I think, are 2 notable wins that I've sort of think as being key, and things that I think the people are interested in learning about. But I was curious from you all's perspective, why is it that, one, collective action is so important, and how is it that you do it in collaboration with other organizations? And is there a particular win that makes you excited to continue doing this work? I know it's a loaded question, but there's a lot there. So feel free to kind of chew on any bit of it.
Yeah, I feel like, like the idea of collective liberation is key to all organizing, because I think it's really important to understand how everything is interconnected. I mean, you can connect anything from Black Lives Matter to like what's happening in the border, what's happening in Palestine, what's happening with Cop City. You can like connect every single dot to how everybody is connected in some way, right? And understanding that abolishing all systems of oppression is directly connected with the liberation of all oppressed people of the world. I think that's such a key point to understand, how if you're not free, then I'm not free, and like having community understand that as well. I think you talked about something that me and Siish were talking about earlier too, just like those key wins. I think for me, right, the biggest was the divestment. We were the first city in this stolen land to divest from the genocide happening in Palestine since October 7th, which was huge. Since then, other cities have seen it as a possibility for them to do it as well. So other cities have had that win as well. And, I think our hope is that other cities continue to move for that. Even Alameda, right? Alameda as a county was the first county to be able to divest, which also happens to be our county. So I think like that movement started, and it's really amazing that we started that. Because it interconnects with everything. We are divesting from the genocide, but we are also divesting from the genocide of the land. So I think that was such a beautiful, huge win. And I hope we keep seeing many more of those.
It's incredible to think about that, that sort of ripple effect that organizers and community residents can have on the ground, right? So like if folks decide not to come together, everyone was sort of outraged by what was happening back in 2020. But if a small group of people didn't decide to stand up, right, we wouldn't have a community organization like HayCoCOa on the ground that's able then to respond to this moment, right, this moment of genocide, which caused this ripple effect that we now, we maybe can't solely take credit for what happened in Hayward, but it definitely had the effect that it was possible and that it could happen at the county level. So it's really incredible to think about that moment where you're throwing maybe a pebble into the water and seeing the ripple effects, because you can see it play out over these past 5 years. Vanessa, I'm curious to hear what you think about the last 5 years and maybe a win for you as you've been reflecting on the past 5 years.
Yeah, well, when we think about some of the folks that we've been collaborating with as an org over time, like a lot of those folks were forced into the movement by being impacted by police brutality. And through that, we've been able to identify our priorities in terms of like, where's our money going? So if we're looking at our tax money, our portfolios and our investments, thinking about our divestment in that way, but also one of our biggest priorities in 2020 and will continue to always be is divesting from police here in Hayward. And with that dream and goal was what else when we do this, because we always have to be optimistic as organizers. Like it's a rough world. And so it's like, what is this glimmer of hope? What is this world that we're working towards? And so when we were like, we will divest from police budgets, when we get that money, where are we going to move it towards? And so one of the biggest wins for me was developing the people's budget. And whether the city will give us credit for that or not, the world will never know. But we know as organizers and as Hayward residents that came from people's voices saying, we want to be able to decide where our money goes. And we got that. And in 2022, we started to see this process where city staff were working with community residents and they were saying, okay, this is what I want to see in my community. And through that, we've seen community gardens, community events, ESL tutoring, just so many things that, again, we're able to see that this is possible. What else can we do? And I think the city will take credit for that, and that's fine. At the end of the day, the folks who live here are still going to benefit from that. And the hope is that we see the power that we can make when we speak up, when we talk to one another, when we know who our neighbors are, when we know what we care about, and we can make things happen outside of the ballot booth or whatever, and these like more normal things. And people will question like, well, this has never been done. And it's like, great, then that means we should really do it. Because if we're unsatisfied with what's happening, let's do something about it. And I think people are scared of that. I'm scared of that on a day-to-day basis, but I want to see something better for myself, for the students I work with, for the next generation. And I think that we need to be bold and do things differently. And so I'm excited to see what else can happen in Hayward and what other ripple effects we can have in neighboring cities and places outside of the Bay too.
Yeah, and just to kind of go over some of the wins that you all sort of have accomplished, the creation of a mobile mental health crisis response team, the ART program, we mentioned the People's Budget, organizing along parents, teachers, and students to prevent the closure of 6 schools, winning local elections. We, on our pilot episode, interviewed George Syrup, who's on the city council, organized with community members to support public demand for canceling the HUSD SRO contracts and keeping cops out of schools, securing $500,000 in legal aid for tenants, pushing for divestment. The list sort of goes on and on, but also you all hit the streets, you clean the streets, you are in community events, tabling, right? So there's this sort of face-to-face interaction, I think, with residents, with local residents, with community members, to show them that, you know, you all aren't like boogeymen, right? You're real, in the flesh, young organizers who I think live in, who are living in the city, but who are sort of normal, everyday people. I think there's this sort of, we can fall into this trap of thinking that organizers are like, I don't know, it's something different than just normal everyday residents. And I think it's super important to highlight the fact that, yeah, we live in these communities, we're normal people, we might be a little bit more bookish or nerdish, about stuff, but it's like I saw Collin, you moved a little bit when I said that, but I was thinking about what, for folks who are watching this and say, especially now in 2025, fascism always creeping, right? Trump entering the White House. I think it's in these moments where people are like, now I really need to do something. What sort of advice or what would you say to folks who are saying like, oh, I'm thinking about getting involved. What should I do? How should I get started? What should I do?
There is room for everybody in the movement. And there's so many different ways to do it. Like, there are folks that, for different reasons, maybe can't leave the house, right? Like, a lot of folks we saw after COVID, are really cannot leave the house because of just different reasons. And there's so many ways, right? Social media, you can run a social media, you can make flyers, you can make this, you can make that. If you're an artist, you can do music, you can, there's so many different ways. I think a lot of people see organizing in one specific way, and then they're like, oh, I can never do that. And I'm like, but you already do that. You do that. You made this event and you organized it, and now you're making that fund go to a specific location to help your community. That is organizing. A lot of folks don't know that they are already organizing. So I think just understanding that there is room for everybody in the movement in different capacities, and tapping in with your local organizers. There is already work that is being done. A lot of the times people are like, oh, I need to reinvent the wheel, but you don't. People are already working on that wheel, and you just have to jump in and help them build it. You can tap in. There's so many folks that we need folks, and I think a lot of folks are like, oh, I don't know, but yeah, I feel in every city there's a group doing something. So tapping in with your local organizers and seeing how you can tap in and what your capacity is, and just doing it. I mean, we were all once new to this movement,
Yeah, I think when I first started off in the movement, we had this training. Vanessa, we'll turn to you in a second, but I just wanted to share this because I think it's we had sort of a role playing where I forget what it was that we were doing, but it was basically we had to write down what our fears were with either, I think it was door knocking or it was some engagement piece, and we would write down all our fears, oh, they'll slam the door in my face, oh, they'll say that I'm stupid and ugly, oh, they'll, they'll whatever, all the fears. Some of them are legit fears, like, oh, they'll, maybe they're racist and they'll, whatever. Legit, that's legit. But most of them, after you go through them, you're like, oh, these are kind of silly, right? These aren't, or like, they're not going to hurt me if it'll be okay if I might get my feelings hurt for a second, right? When they slam the door in my face, but actually it'll be fine. And I'll move on to the next house and I'll try it again, right? So it's this sort of practice, I think, with a lot of folks when they refuse to, or not when they refuse, but when they're scared about jumping in, it's always like these kind of irrational fears of like why they don't want to engage in the work. And it's like, oh, maybe I'm not the right person. Maybe I can't do that. I don't see myself speaking on a bullhorn. But Vanessa, any thoughts on what folks can do to get engaged?
Yeah, I mean, second everything that Lala said, definitely tapping in with folks, tapping in with HayCoCOa on Instagram, but also like outside, I mean, we're not the only ones that exist. I mean, there's so many folks locally. You have Filipino Advocates for Justice, which is right next door, and then folks in the city. So I think that's a great way to start following what people are doing, and then easy ways to tap in. I think you mentioned it earlier, Nestor, like we do street cleanups. That's a great way to just like at least see who is in the space, having small conversations so that it doesn't feel like, oh, I have to show up to a protest and have a sign ready and all these things. Like that can be a lot for some folks. So like come clean up the streets and have a conversation with someone. And I think taking that first step and having a conversation, I think is the best part. And I think that's what we have trained ourselves as organizers. Like we're going to stop talking and screaming at people. Like we just want to listen. Like we want to know what the community cares about. That way we can fight for those things alongside you. And it's not like we're just, because I think we came up as that, like, oh, they're the group that like yells at city council meetings, but we were yelling about good things, but now we want to listen. Now we want to know what other things can we do? What things should we focus on and build upon? And we can't do that unless we're having those conversations. So I would just, tap in, talk to your neighbors also. Like that way you have like a rally of groups, or also like your workplace. If you are already having these conversations about some of the struggles that you're having, what does organizing look like in your life already? And what skills would you want to bring into a different kind of movement?
I love that. I don't remember who mentioned this to me, but they were saying that, we should think about organizing almost like as and not to typecast any of us, right? But to pretend like we're playing a specific role in like in a play or in a video game, whatever your hobby is, right? And thinking about like some of us are going to be there to be on the offensive, others of us are going to be there to defend our communities, right? We all have sort of different attributes and different skills that make us unique and make us important to the movement. And we can bring, as you both have already said so eloquently, we can bring those things and put them to use, right? Sometimes it's just the being able to bring folks together around food and and have those conversations. Sometimes it's showing up to City Hall and yelling at people. Those are important things that we need to be doing also, right? And so I appreciate you both taking the time to talk a little bit about your experience as organizers here in Hayward, your experience organizing your communities, talking a little bit about your wins. Is there anything you want to say to the trolls out in the cyberspace? No, nothing. All right. Well, we won't go there. We won't go there. But I appreciate you all taking the time. It's been quite a pleasure. And Collin, any last words?
No, it's a pleasure to have you both. Thank you for taking the time to join us and diluting this overly masculine space a little bit, because it's a lot, and I appreciate y'all showing up. It's great to see you.